The first step was to establish the timeline. Weeks had passed since the meeting occurred, and in that time, Meghan had moved quietly, almost invisibly, orchestrating her return to palace discussions. Harry, initially unaware, now needed to track every detail, every interaction, and every hint that could shed light on the agenda. According to insiders, the meeting had been scheduled with careful precision. Every hour, every location, every participant had been deliberately chosen to minimize scrutiny and maximize control. It reportedly began on a quiet Tuesday morning. The King's diary, meticulously maintained and often scrutinized for protocol, had an unusual entry: private discussion, HRM and MM. To the casual observer, it might have seemed innocuous, but Harry knew better. The entry marked the first step in a sequence that would ripple through the palace, shifting alliances, testing loyalty, and challenging assumptions. As Harry dug deeper, he learned that Meghan had arrived at the palace under the guise of routine engagements. Security arrangements were standard, but subtle deviations, unusually tight scheduling, minimal staff, restricted access, signaled that this was not an ordinary visit. It was controlled, intentional, and carefully choreographed. For Harry, each detail added clarity, but also heightened the sense of betrayal. She had engineered an environment in which she could negotiate independently, strategically, and without his knowledge. Audience question: if you were Harry, how would you feel learning that someone you trusted had meticulously planned a meeting in secret? Would the precision make it feel more calculated or more cunning? Every step of Meghan's meeting was deliberate, each action serving multiple purposes: controlling perception, managing timing, and influencing outcomes. The duration of the meeting was deliberately concise, according to insiders, long enough to convey intentions, test reactions, and propose possibilities, but short enough to limit exposure and scrutiny. King Charles, seasoned and aware of the potential implications, engaged carefully, responding with measured curiosity and strategic listening. Every exchange, every pause, every nod carried weight. Harry could almost envision the room, the soft hum of palace life beyond the walls, the subtle gestures, the eyes of aides and security staff, all orchestrated to ensure that the meeting remained confidential. But timing alone wasn't the only factor. The sequence of events surrounding the meeting was equally critical. Leading up to it, Meghan had subtly adjusted her public statements, interviews, and social media presence, carefully shaping the narrative without drawing attention to the meeting itself. In the days following, she maintained a delicate balance, appearing engaged with charitable and personal endeavors, while quietly signaling readiness to negotiate and re-enter certain royal spheres. It was a masterclass in timing, strategy, and control. For Harry, reconstructing this timeline became a forensic exercise. Every text, email, and private message needed review. Each conversation with aides, friends, or palace staff could provide clues. And every minor detail, like the precise timing of a security checkpoint or the allocation of staff to manage a corridor, offered insight into how meticulously Meghan had engineered the meeting. The emotional weight of this realization was intense. Not only had she acted independently, but she had done so with remarkable precision, suggesting foresight and intentionality. Then came the hardest part: understanding the implications of the timeline. The meeting had occurred at a point when Harry believed he had full situational awareness. He assumed, wrongly, that he knew what was happening, who was involved, and how decisions were made. In reality, Meghan had already created a parallel narrative, a strategy unfolding in real time, outside his knowledge, shaping perceptions, alliances, and potential outcomes. The sense of exclusion was staggering. Every day he had lived in ignorance now felt like a missed opportunity, a lost chance to participate, respond, or intervene. The sequence of events also highlighted a deliberate layering of information. Meghan had not only structured the meeting itself, but also orchestrated how and when its existence would become known. Certain aides were instructed to limit disclosures. Others were positioned to control interpretations. The result was a complex choreography. Harry remained unaware, the king engaged cautiously, and the palace was positioned to manage fallout with precision. Each layer of timing reinforced the strategic nature of the meeting, and each layer intensified Harry's sense of being blindsided. Audience question: how would you react if you discovered that even the smallest details of someone's actions were calculated to exclude you? How would you determine intent, loyalty, and potential consequences? For Harry, the process was exhausting, emotionally draining, and crucial. He had to assess not just the meeting itself, but the cascade of events surrounding it, the preparation, execution, and aftermath, all orchestrated without his involvement. As he continued piecing together the timeline, Harry began to map the potential motives and outcomes. Meghan's actions were consistent with a strategy designed to test boundaries, gauge reception, and position herself independently. The timing, the sequence, the controlled disclosures, all suggested a deliberate attempt to influence both the king and public perception. For Harry, this realization deepened the emotional impact. Betrayal was now intertwined with strategic sophistication, and the combination was both painful and disorienting. Moreover, the timeline revealed subtle contradictions in palace communications. While some officials maintained that the meeting was routine, others hinted at more significant discussions. Texts, emails, and private memos suggested that Meghan had presented proposals that went beyond image rehabilitation, touching on autonomy, influence, and potential re-entry scenarios. The timing of these communications, carefully aligned with public appearances and strategic engagements, reinforced the notion that this was not a casual conversation. It was a carefully executed plan. And just when Harry thought he had a grasp on the sequence, a startling detail emerged. The king had reportedly taken notes, subtle but significant, during the meeting. The implication was profound. Meghan's words, her proposals, and her positioning were not only recorded, but likely analyzed for long-term strategic implications. Harry realized that the meeting had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. It wasn't just a private conversation. It was an event with ripples extending through the palace, family, and public perception. In reconstructing the timeline, Harry also discovered the deliberate pacing of Meghan's actions. Each step was calculated. Her arrival, the meeting's duration, the choice of words, the controlled exits, and even the timing of her communications with external parties. Everything was precise, designed to create impact, influence perceptions, and minimize exposure. The sophistication of this orchestration left Harry both awed and unsettled. Finally, the timeline revealed one inescapable truth: he had been intentionally excluded. Every element of Meghan's meeting was constructed to ensure he remained unaware until it was either strategically advantageous for her or unavoidable for him. The emotional and strategic implications were staggering. Harry had to reconcile the betrayal, assess the strategic genius, and prepare for a response that would address both personal and institutional consequences. What would you do if the world you trusted suddenly revealed a hidden layer of secrets, and you were the last to know? That was Harry's reality now. Meghan's clandestine meeting with King Charles had already upended his sense of stability, but the emotional impact quickly gave way to a practical need: investigation. He had to uncover the full picture, every detail, every nuance, every hidden action that had shaped this secret encounter. Because in the palace, half-truths were dangerous, and assumptions could be fatal. Harry began cautiously, aware that every step could be monitored or misinterpreted. First, he reached out to his closest confidants, those he trusted implicitly, seeking clarity without revealing vulnerability. Friends who had navigated past royal crises offered perspective, outlining the palace's likely motivations and hinting at Meghan's possible intentions. Their insights were invaluable, but they also painted a sobering reality. Much of what he had assumed about loyalty, transparency, and partnership was now in question. The investigation took multiple forms. He combed through digital communications, reviewing messages and emails that might reveal indirect clues about Meghan's planning. Patterns emerged: certain phrases, repeated inquiries, and subtle coordination with advisors pointed toward a deliberate strategy. Each piece of evidence added to the tapestry of Meghan's agenda, highlighting both her independence and the precision with which she executed her plan. The realization was both enlightening and emotionally painful. He had been deliberately excluded, and her actions were meticulously calculated. At the same time, Harry relied on traditional palace sources. Trusted aides and longtime advisors were questioned discreetly. Every conversation required careful navigation. Words had to be chosen deliberately, observations had to be framed carefully, and reactions had to be measured. He quickly realized that not everyone was aligned with him. Some advisors, possibly aware of the meeting from the start, provided partial truths or delayed confirmations, testing how he would respond. The maze of palace politics was proving as treacherous as any media storm, and Harry had to act strategically to separate fact from interpretation. Emotional tension ran high. Each discovery was a mixture of anger, betrayal, and reluctant admiration. Meghan's independent maneuvering revealed her strategic acumen, her ability to operate within complex institutional structures, and her skill in managing perception. Yet at the same time, the personal sting of being left out of such a pivotal decision weighed heavily. Harry felt a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, hurt, outrage, and an unsettling recognition of the breadth of her influence. The investigation also required scrutinizing the timeline further. Dates, locations, communications. All were mapped meticulously. Harry cross-referenced notes from aides, recollections from friends, and fragments of public appearances to build a coherent picture of the events surrounding Meghan's secret meeting. Every detail mattered. Even minor deviations in scheduling, subtle hints in phrasing, or slight changes in behavior became pieces of a complex puzzle. And as the picture became clearer, the scope of Meghan's autonomy and strategic intent became undeniable. Audience question: if you discovered someone you trusted had orchestrated an intricate plan behind your back, would you feel anger, respect, or a mixture of both? Harry's emotional journey mirrors this duality: personal betrayal intertwined with admiration for her calculated approach. Understanding intent is never easy, especially when emotions run deep and stakes are monumental. Another aspect of Harry's investigation involved tracing back communications to external sources. Publicists, aides, and even media contacts were scrutinized to determine whether leaks, deliberate or accidental, had played a role in the unfolding narrative. Harry realized that information flow was tightly controlled, and that any premature disclosure could have massive consequences, both for him and for Meghan. Every discovery needed careful handling to ensure it contributed to understanding, rather than escalating the drama. As he delved deeper, contradictions emerged. Some palace insiders maintained that the meeting was routine, a simple discussion without concrete outcomes. Others insisted that Meghan's proposals were bold, far-reaching, and independent, challenging traditional norms and potentially altering the royal hierarchy. Harry was forced to weigh these conflicting accounts, assessing credibility, intent, and underlying motives. This was not just an exercise in investigation. It was a strategic battle for understanding, context, and control. A pivotal moment in Harry's private inquiry came when he identified a key advisor who had direct knowledge of the meeting. Their initial reluctance to speak only heightened tension. But through careful dialogue, cross-checking, and persistence, Harry began piecing together critical elements. Meghan had approached King Charles with proposals for image rehabilitation, re-entry into public life, and autonomy in certain decisions. She had framed her requests thoughtfully, strategically, and independently. For Harry, this confirmation was simultaneously validating and devastating. The emotional dimension of the investigation could not be ignored. Harry grappled with feelings of exclusion, doubt, and betrayal, while also acknowledging Meghan's skill and audacity. Every revelation forced him to reconcile personal pain with the practical necessity of understanding strategy. How could he confront her? How could he address the king? And most importantly, how could he navigate a situation where trust had been fractured, alliances were unclear, and the stakes were monumental? Further complicating matters, Harry discovered evidence suggesting that Meghan had not acted impulsively. Her meeting was premeditated, aligned with broader goals, and executed with precision. The level of foresight and planning was remarkable, indicating that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a calculated move with long-term implications. Every day, every detail, every step was intentional, reinforcing the depth of her strategy and the gravity of her choices. Audience question: would you confront the person immediately, or wait to gather every piece of evidence first? Harry's challenge highlights the tension between emotional reaction and strategic patience. Acting too soon could provoke conflict, while waiting could allow the narrative to evolve further, potentially complicating outcomes. In the course of his investigation, Harry also uncovered subtle signals suggesting that Meghan's meeting was part of a larger pattern of independent actions. Communications with certain palace advisors, strategic public appearances, and even private conversations indicated that she was operating on a trajectory designed to reclaim influence, image, and autonomy. For Harry, the implications were staggering. He was not simply reacting to a single event. He was confronting a calculated series of maneuvers that had been unfolding beyond his awareness. The investigation ultimately left Harry with a dual understanding. Emotionally, he had been blindsided, betrayed, and challenged. Strategically, he faced a complex scenario demanding patience, insight, and precise action. Every move he made next would have to account for personal feelings, palace protocol, and public perception. Every decision would ripple across relationships, influence, and the royal narrative. And just when Harry thought he had a full grasp of Meghan's strategy, a new revelation arrived. One of the aides subtly hinted at further communications between Meghan and external advisors, plans, proposals, and contingencies that Harry had yet to uncover. The intrigue deepened, and the stakes escalated. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to lead to another, more intricate layer of strategy. How do you process betrayal when it cuts not just into your public life, but straight into the heart of your personal world? That's what Harry faced in the days following his discovery of Meghan's secret meeting with King Charles. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a swirling storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion, and an undercurrent of disbelief that someone so close could orchestrate such a calculated maneuver without him. The emotional fallout was immediate. Harry felt blindsided, not just by Meghan, but by the palace ecosystem that had allowed the meeting to occur without his knowledge. Every conversation he had since then carried the weight of suspicion. Even trusted aides seemed layered with hidden agendas. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming. He was part of a family built on centuries of tradition and protocol, yet in this moment, he felt like an outsider in his own life. Anger was the first to emerge. How could Meghan act independently, negotiate directly with the king, and exclude him entirely? The thought of her positioning herself strategically while leaving him uninformed was infuriating. Every scenario he imagined intensified the sense of betrayal. The palace walls that had once felt secure now seemed confining, suffocating, and full of whispers that only amplified his frustration. Confusion followed closely. How had he not seen the signs? Had there been subtle hints, minor clues he overlooked, or was the operation so meticulously executed that detection was impossible? Harry found himself replaying past conversations, public appearances, and private interactions, searching for any indication that Meghan had been planning this all along. The more he looked, the more complex the picture became. It wasn't simply a matter of secrecy. It was an intricate web of strategy, perception, and influence. At the same time, grief crept in. It wasn't just about trust or betrayal. It was about a relationship he had invested in deeply, personally, and publicly. The realization that Meghan had acted independently, making moves that affected their shared future, was emotionally devastating. Every thought of partnership, collaboration, and mutual decision-making was now overshadowed by doubt. Could he ever fully trust her again? Could their bond withstand the weight of such calculated autonomy? The emotional toll wasn't confined to introspection. It spilled into interactions with family, aides, and advisors. Harry found himself more guarded, his questions sharper, his patience thinner. The palace, with its centuries of formal decorum, felt suddenly oppressive. Every meeting, every briefing, every casual remark became a test. Was this another layer of secrecy, manipulation, or strategy? Could he trust what he was being told, or was it a curated narrative designed to influence his reactions? Audience question: how do you balance the desire for understanding with the sting of betrayal? How do you confront someone you love when you don't fully know their motives? Harry's dilemma mirrors this tension perfectly. Every move required careful consideration, emotional restraint, and strategic awareness. Reacting too quickly could escalate conflict, Reacting too slowly could allow the narrative to spiral beyond control. The emotional fallout was compounded by public perception. Even without leaks, Harry knew that the mere existence of such a meeting, if discovered, could ignite speculation, scrutiny, and criticism. The pressure to maintain composure, protect family image, and navigate media narratives was immense. He felt the dual weight of personal betrayal and public responsibility, a combination that intensified emotional strain. Imagine waking up one morning, expecting the usual headlines about charity events, royal engagements, or light gossip. Instead, the news hits like a thunderbolt. Buckingham Palace confirms that Prince Harry will be permanently stripped of all his royal titles. Every title, every ceremonial honor, every ounce of his official identity as a prince is gone. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Duke of Sussex? Revoked. Military honors? Gone. Ceremonial affiliations? All wiped from the record. And this decree wasn't an idle threat. King Charles himself had signed it, and the decision is described as painful but final. No reversals. No room for negotiation. Can you even begin to imagine what that feels like? To go from being the youngest son of a reigning monarch, a global celebrity with titles and privileges that many would kill for, to suddenly being untitled, unrecognized, and officially severed from the institution you were born into? The shock is visceral. The implications stretch far beyond the palace walls. For Harry, it's not just about losing status. It's about identity, legacy, family, and the very definition of who he is. In the first moments after the announcement, the palace corridors buzzed with tension. Courtiers whispered. Advisors exchanged nervous glances. The message wasn't just public, it was private, direct, and final. Staff who had served Harry for years reportedly wept in silence. Some couldn't fathom seeing the man they knew, an accomplished soldier, philanthropist, and devoted father, reduced in official standing by a single stroke of a pen. And the public? They were watching, glued to screens worldwide, eyes wide, hearts racing, as the news broke. Social media erupted, tabloids exploded, and every outlet scrambled to interpret what this meant. But let's pause here for a second. Why now? Why this decisive move at this precise moment? Some might argue that Harry's increasing independence, his media engagements, and his vocal criticism of royal protocol made this unavoidable. Others whisper about a deeper, more personal rift with the king. Behind the official statements, there's a story of family tensions, public scrutiny, and decades of complex relationships that few outside the inner circle could ever hope to fully understand. You might be wondering, is this a permanent fracture or just a harsh warning? The language of the decree is clear, permanent. There is no precedent in modern royal history for this level of severance, especially for a prince so beloved by the public. And yet, history has seen its share of family conflicts within the monarchy. Exiles, removals, and public humiliations have occurred, but this feels different. This feels like a watershed moment, the kind of event that will ripple through the palace, the nation, and Harry's life forever. Let's talk about the human side of it. Imagine receiving the news yourself. The phone call, perhaps from a senior palace official, that starts with formal language, measured tones, then delivers the verdict. You sit there, frozen. The words echo in your mind. Titles, honors, affiliations, all gone. Every ceremony you've participated in, every duty, every title that defined you in the public eye, now stripped away. You think of your family, your children, the public you've served, the charities you support, and a wave of disbelief and heartache hits. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a single, terrifying thought forms. What now? Of course, this isn't just about Harry as an individual. It's about the monarchy itself. The British royal family, an institution steeped in centuries of tradition, protocol, and hierarchy, has just taken a step that will be analyzed, debated, and dissected endlessly. The optics are explosive. Supporters of the monarchy see a decisive act, a necessary assertion of authority. Critics see cruelty, pettiness, and a family failing to adapt to the modern world. And the media frenzy guarantees that no detail, no whisper, and no personal reaction will remain hidden for long. Now, let's consider the ripple effects on Harry's immediate life. Losing your titles isn't just symbolic. It affects everything. Royal titles carry access, influence, and a kind of social armor. Military honors are tied to respect, duty, and identity. Ceremonial roles connect you to history, tradition, and visibility on the global stage. Stripped of these, Harry is no longer Duke of Sussex in any official sense. He is no longer recognized by the military as a decorated officer. The ceremonial world that shaped him, gave him purpose, and placed him in the public eye has suddenly closed its doors. How does one navigate that sudden void? How does a man so defined by public recognition adjust to life outside the orbit of the palace? And then there's the question of Meghan. The Duchess of Sussex, Harry's partner and mother to their children, has always been a figure of intense public scrutiny herself. Imagine her perspective in this moment. Support, anger, heartbreak, strategic planning, and maternal concern all collide. The palace announcement doesn't just affect Harry, it sends shockwaves through their family unit. Their children, Archie and Lilibet, grow up in a world where their father's status has been dramatically altered, their titles erased before their eyes. The stakes are emotional, political, and personal, all at once. So why is this story happening now? Some speculate that it's tied to Harry's ongoing media appearances, interviews, and memoirs. Others hint at private disagreements, letters exchanged, and conversations behind closed doors that went badly. Whatever the exact trigger, the message is clear. This is irreversible. Buckingham Palace has drawn a line in the sand. There is no negotiating. There is no reconsidering. And the implications are only beginning to unfold. Consider this. Titles are more than just words. They represent centuries of tradition, family lineage, and personal identity. Stripping Harry of his titles doesn't just erase official recognition. It erases a part of history, a part of his story, and potentially a part of the public's understanding of him. The emotional gravity is enormous. For Harry, for the monarchy, and for the public watching around the globe, this moment will not be forgotten. It's the kind of story that generates debates, op-eds, think pieces, and social media storms for months, if not years. And yet, there's a curiosity gap here that keeps us on the edge of our seats. What really happened behind closed doors? What conversations, arguments, or incidents led King Charles to make such a permanent, decisive action? Were there attempts at reconciliation that failed? Did personal betrayal play a role? Or was this purely about maintaining the monarchy's image, order, and tradition in a modern world that is increasingly skeptical of royal authority? We can only speculate at this point, but the palace's official confirmation, combined with the clarity and severity of the decree, leaves little doubt. Harry's official royal life is over. For a man who has lived his life in the spotlight, who has carefully balanced duty, personal freedom, and public service, this is nothing short of transformative. And for the public, the intrigue is irresistible. Everyone wants to know what comes next. But here's the kicker. While the titles, honors, and ceremonial affiliations are gone, Harry is still Harry. A son, a brother, a father, a husband, a public figure with influence. How will he adapt to life outside the structure he was born into? How will he navigate the media scrutiny, the family tensions, and the public curiosity? And most importantly, what will his next move be in a world that has suddenly shifted beneath his feet? This story matters now because it isn't just a royal headline. It's a human story about loss, identity, family, and the weight of tradition. It's about power and consequence. It's about how one family's decision can reverberate across the globe, impacting millions who watch, analyze, and emotionally invest in every twist and turn. The drama is immediate, personal, and far-reaching. And the best, or perhaps worst, is yet to come. So as we dive into this story, keep this in mind. What you're about to hear is more than just headlines. It's the hidden truth behind a royal decree that has changed everything. The palace may call it painful but final, but the real story. The private conversations, the emotional fallout, the shocking twists, has only just begun. And what comes next could change everything about how we see Harry, the monarchy, and the very meaning of royal power in the 21st century. At 9 a.m., the world knew. The royal decree had been signed, and in an instant, Prince Harry's life as he knew it changed forever. But what exactly happened that morning? How did a single piece of paper, written in precise legal language and sealed with royal authority, carry the weight to strip a prince of all his titles. And why did the palace insist on calling it painful but final? The day began like any other, at least on the surface. Buckingham Palace's corridors were quiet, almost deceptively calm. Courtiers moved about with rehearsed efficiency, answering phones, sorting schedules, and preparing briefings for the royal family. But beneath that calm, tension crackled like electricity. Senior aides were summoned, doors closed, and messages that had been carefully drafted in the early hours now waited for approval. Every word was deliberate, every phrase calculated to convey authority, yet maintain a veneer of civility. Then the call came through. Harry's private secretary, a figure loyal and experienced, picked up the phone with the kind of measured professionalism that belied the storm about to hit. On the other end, a senior official delivered the decree. The language was formal, clinical, yet its implications were anything but. Duke of Sussex, military honors, ceremonial affiliations, all revoked immediately. The tone was polite, almost detached, but the finality was unmistakable. Harry was silent at first, the words echoing in his mind. And then, the inevitable question, how had it come to this? Let's pause for a moment and consider the power of such a decree. This isn't a casual announcement or a suggestion. This is the king exercising centuries of constitutional authority, a privilege that can alter lives with the stroke of a pen. And it wasn't just symbolic. Royal titles are deeply entwined with personal identity, public perception, and a network of duties and responsibilities that extend far beyond ceremonial appearances. When Harry's titles were stripped, the palace effectively rewrote his role in both the monarchy and the public eye. But what led to this moment? Many speculate it wasn't a single incident, but a culmination of tensions, grievances, and missteps, both personal and public. For years, Harry had navigated a delicate balance, fulfilling royal duties, carving out his own path, and managing public perception. Yet each attempt at independence, interviews, memoirs, media appearances, even his charitable endeavors, was scrutinized, dissected, and often criticized. And behind closed doors, disagreements with King Charles and senior advisors reportedly escalated. Meetings that should have been private became sources of frustration. Words that should have been conciliatory only deepened rifts. Imagine being in Harry's position. You dedicate your life to service, to family, to causes you believe in. And suddenly, the institution you've been part of all your life delivers a verdict so severe it leaves no room for discussion. How do you process that? How do you reconcile your public persona with this private reality? It's a mixture of shock, anger, disbelief, and a profound sense of betrayal. The palace, of course, presented the decree in official statements designed to project authority and dignity. Media outlets around the world broadcast the news with urgency, emphasizing the finality of the king's decision. Royal watchers speculated endlessly. Was this about control, about protecting the monarchy's image, or about personal grievances that had reached a breaking point? Each theory added another layer of intrigue, deepening the public's curiosity while increasing the pressure on Harry. And Harry's reaction? Initial reports suggest a mixture of stunned silence, private consultations with advisors, and emotional conversations with Meghan. Sources close to the couple describe Harry as grappling with the enormity of what he had just lost. The Duke of Sussex had been more than a title. It was his connection to family, a symbol of duty, and a marker of history. To lose it all at once is more than just administrative, it's personal. Consider the psychological weight of the moment. Titles are not mere labels. They define roles, expectations, and even self-identity. Military honors signify honor, courage, and service. Ceremonial duties embed you in the rituals and traditions that span centuries. Stripped of these, Harry faces a void that extends beyond the public eye. Who is he now, without the framework that shaped his life? What does it mean for his children, who will grow up in a world where their father's official identity has been dramatically altered? And how will this affect Meghan, his confidant and partner in navigating both family and public life? The decree also raises questions about the monarchy's long-term strategy. Was this an act of enforcement, a signal to other royals, or a personal statement from King Charles? By calling it painful but final, The palace signals that no amount of negotiation, apology, or future service will reverse the decision. It is an act meant to close a chapter definitively. Yet, the human element ensures that the story is far from over. Within hours, reactions poured in from around the globe. Social media exploded with commentary ranging from empathy to outrage. Memes proliferated, op-eds were published, and analysts debated the historical context. Many drew parallels to previous royal controversies, while others argued that the modern media landscape amplified the drama in unprecedented ways. One thing was clear: this wasn't just a royal decree. It was a global event with cultural, political, and personal dimensions. But here's where it gets more complicated. While the titles were revoked, Harry remains Harry. The man, the father, the husband, the public figure with influence and a voice. That voice is already being analyzed, amplified, and scrutinized. Every next move he makes will be interpreted through the lens of this dramatic loss. Will he retreat into privacy, or will he engage the world with the force of someone wronged? And what about the internal family dynamics? How will William, Charles, and other royals react behind closed doors when the news finally reaches them in full? The emotional and psychological stakes are staggering. Some sources suggest that even senior palace staff were unprepared for the intensity of Harry's reaction. Courtiers who had seen decades of royal protocol report that the personal nature of this loss has shaken the palace in ways that formal decrees cannot measure. There is grief, shock, and perhaps even fear. Fear of public backlash, fear of media exploitation, and fear of further personal conflict. And yet, despite all the chaos, one question dominates the conversation. What comes next for Harry? His path is uncharted. His influence, while diminished in formal terms, remains potent. The public has invested in his story, and every action he takes will carry immense symbolic weight. The palace may have stripped him of titles, but they cannot erase his identity or his capacity to shape events. What the decree truly reveals is a clash of priorities. Tradition versus individuality, duty versus autonomy, family loyalty versus public scrutiny. The monarchy is an institution built to withstand generations, yet it is also composed of human beings with personal feelings, pride, and grievances. In Harry's case, those human elements collided with centuries of protocol, creating a moment that will be studied and debated for years to come. And here's the most compelling question of all: how did it reach this point? What conversations, what incidents, what hidden tensions led to this irreversible act? Was there a single breaking point, or was it a slow accumulation of misunderstandings, disagreements, and resentments? And most importantly, how will Harry navigate the aftermath, knowing that his official identity has been stripped, but his life, influence, and public presence continue unabated? As the world watched, the initial shock gave way to speculation, analysis, and a deeper curiosity about what truly transpired behind the palace walls. Every insider account hinted at secrets, betrayals, and private conflicts that no press release could fully convey. And while the decree itself was final, the story it set in motion was only beginning. But what comes next is even more surprising. The first reactions within the palace, the private communications, and the choices Harry will make in response are already setting the stage for events that could redefine the monarchy itself. And one insider has hinted at a revelation so shocking it could change everything about how we understand Harry's position, his relationship with the king, and the family dynamics that led to this unprecedented decision. At first glance, Buckingham Palace looks timeless, a fortress of history and ceremony, a place where the rhythm of life seems almost impervious to the chaos outside. But on the day the royal decree was signed, the palace was anything but serene. Behind the gilded doors, a storm was brewing, one that would expose hidden tensions, whispered betrayals, and secrets the public had never been allowed to see. How does a decision of this magnitude come together? Who whispers in whose ear, and who holds the final authority when a prince is about to lose everything? The palace, often perceived as a symbol of stability, is in reality a complex ecosystem of advisors, aides, family members, and centuries of unspoken rules. On that fateful morning, every cog in that machinery clicked into action, setting off a chain of events that would ripple through every corner of the monarchy. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Senior aides shuffled documents, carefully aligning the language of the decree with legal precedents and the king's personal directives. One palace insider described the mood as tense, almost electric, like the calm before a storm that everyone knows is coming but no one can stop. These weren't ordinary bureaucrats going about their day. They were gatekeepers of history, carrying out actions that would be dissected in headlines and history books alike. One of the key figures in this drama was the private secretary, tasked with delivering the decree to Harry. The role demanded impeccable diplomacy, yet the weight of the message made every step agonizing. Staff members later reported that even seasoned courtiers were unsettled, some openly expressing shock at the formality and finality of the words. Conversations that usually revolved around schedules and ceremonial duties were replaced with hushed debates, whispered speculations, and nervous glances. And then there were the confidential memos. Long before the public knew, memos had circulated outlining the rationale for stripping Harry of his titles. Some cited breaches of protocol, others referenced repeated media appearances that were seen as critical of the monarchy. The documents were meticulous, every phrase weighed for legal and emotional impact. But while they were precise, the language could not capture the human element, the fear, anger, and heartbreak that simmered behind palace walls. Imagine being one of those aides, responsible for ensuring the decree's execution goes smoothly. You are aware that the eyes of the world will scrutinize every word, every gesture. Yet you are also acutely aware that you are participating in a moment that could forever alter a family's dynamics. The tension is palpable. Reports suggest that some aides left the room shaking, realizing that they were witnessing not just a legal decision, but a deeply personal rupture in the royal family. And there were the whispers, quiet conversations in corridors and offices that hinted at disagreements among advisors themselves. Some believed that Harry had crossed a line too many times. Others argued for a more measured approach, fearing the public backlash of such a harsh decree. These debates, though private, added to the palace's charged atmosphere. Every opinion carried weight, because the king's choice, once made, would be irreversible. But the palace is not just about documents and whispers. It's about history, tradition, and hierarchy. The ceremonial halls, the portraits of past monarchs, the echo of centuries-old protocols. All these elements form a backdrop to the modern drama unfolding. The juxtaposition is striking. While Harry faces a dramatic, life-altering decision, the palace continues to operate according to rules set centuries ago, a reminder that family conflicts are often entwined with institutional imperatives. Even more intriguing are the sources who later described unusual meetings that morning. Some insiders report that King Charles himself was present for critical discussions, directly influencing wording and timing. Others suggest that advisors feared his decisiveness, knowing that once he committed, there would be no turning back. The king's presence alone added gravity to the proceedings, underscoring that this was not a standard administrative action but a statement of authority and finality. Then there are the questions of loyalty and discretion. How many of the palace staff truly supported the decision, and how many quietly worried about its repercussions? There were reportedly heated discussions about who should be allowed access to information, who could deliver messages, and who should be tasked with managing the inevitable media fallout. Every choice had implications for both the family and the monarchy's public image. The emotional tension inside Buckingham Palace was mirrored in more private quarters as well. Royals themselves were reportedly grappling with shock, disbelief, and a flurry of personal reflections. Sources hint at moments of intense private conversation between family members, ranging from pleas for reconsideration to arguments over loyalty and duty. Every reaction, every emotion, was amplified by the knowledge that the public would soon be watching, analyzing, and reacting. Consider the layers of secrecy required in such a situation. One wrong word could leak, one misstep could become fodder for tabloids. And yet, despite the careful planning, some leaks did occur, hinting at the behind-the-scenes drama. These small pieces of information, whether deliberate or accidental, fueled speculation about palace politics, personal grievances, and the possible fallout of the king's decision. Even palace security had to adapt. The announcement would bring reporters, photographers, and even protesters to the gates. Protocol dictated measured responses, but the reality was far more dynamic. Staff had to prepare for every contingency, anticipating both media intrusion and the public's emotional response to a story that was, by its nature, intensely personal, yet undeniably public. And then there's the human side of the advisors themselves. These are people who have spent careers serving the royal family, cultivating trust, managing crises, and upholding tradition. Yet even they are not immune to the emotional impact of the decree. One insider described feeling like a witness to history and tragedy at the same time, a sentiment echoed by others who later spoke to reporters under anonymity. The complexity of serving an institution that can simultaneously demand loyalty and deliver personal blows is staggering. What emerges from all of this is a portrait of Buckingham Palace not as a monolithic symbol of stability, but as a living, breathing organism where human emotions, politics, and tradition collide. The royal decree was more than just a piece of paper. It was the culmination of months, if not years, of tension, calculation, and negotiation. It represents a moment where personal grievances, institutional priorities, and public perception intersected in a way that could not be undone. And yet, even in this meticulously orchestrated environment, unpredictability remained. Sources suggest that some aides feared Harry's reaction, knowing that no decree, no matter how formal, could contain the personal and emotional consequences. The palace may have framed the decision as final, but the human element ensured that the story was far from over. Every whispered conversation, every strategic choice, and every private reflection inside Buckingham Palace was a piece of a larger puzzle, one that would only become clearer as events unfolded. By the time the public learned of the decree, Buckingham Palace had already entered a new phase, managing the fallout. Press briefings, carefully worded statements, and controlled leaks were deployed to shape the narrative. But the intrigue inside the palace, the conversations, the disagreements, the personal stakes, was something the public would never fully see. These moments, hidden from cameras and headlines, defined the story just as much as the decree itself. And here's the kicker. While the world focused on titles and ceremonial losses, some insiders hint at even deeper palace secrets, documents, and correspondences that shed light on previously unknown conflicts. Private letters, off-the-record memos, and confidential discussions reveal a level of tension and strategy that borders on the dramatic, almost Shakespearean. Betrayals, warnings ignored, and calculated moves were all part of the narrative, making the official announcement only the tip of the iceberg. So as the palace moves forward, what comes next? How will Harry respond to not just the decree, but the intricate web of palace secrets and whispers that preceded it? Will the king maintain absolute control over the narrative, or will cracks appear as advisors, staff, and family members navigate their own loyalties and fears? The internal world of Buckingham Palace is alive with tension, strategy, and emotion, and every revelation has the potential to reshape the story entirely. And the most astonishing part? One insider has hinted at a document, hidden away in a private office, that could alter the public perception of the decree itself. A piece of correspondence so revealing that it may explain the personal motivations behind the king's decision, and perhaps even hint at potential avenues for Harry to challenge or respond. The details are murky, the implications immense, and the secrecy intact, for now. But what comes next inside Buckingham Palace, behind the polished doors and golden railings, could redefine everything. The next revelation will not just shock the public. It may shake the monarchy to its core and leave Harry facing choices that no one outside those walls can yet imagine. The bond between brothers can be unbreakable, or it can be fragile, frayed by misunderstandings, rivalries, and the weight of expectation. For Prince Harry and Prince William, the relationship has always been under a public microscope, scrutinized through the lens of royal protocol, media speculation, and family dynamics. But the royal decree stripping Harry of all his titles brought that bond into sharp focus, exposing fractures that had long simmered beneath the surface. How could one family navigate such a personal blow under the scrutiny of the entire world? And how did William respond to seeing his brother's life upended? From the moment the palace announcement went public, sources suggest William was blindsided. Even as the heir to the throne, accustomed to scrutiny and the heavy mantle of expectation, he reportedly struggled to process the implications of the decision. On one hand, loyalty demanded that he support the king, uphold the monarchy's authority, and accept the necessity of difficult decisions. On the other, blood ties and decades of shared childhood experiences tugged in the opposite direction. The tension was immediate, electric, and impossible to ignore. Private conversations between the brothers reportedly began almost immediately. Some insiders claim that William's initial words were measured, almost clinical, reflecting a commitment to duty. Yet behind closed doors, emotion seeped through. Words of concern, frustration, and even subtle blame surfaced. "How did it come to this?" he allegedly asked in private, echoing the question that millions of royal watchers asked aloud. But Harry, facing both the loss and the betrayal of titles he had cherished, had his own set of emotions: hurt, defiance, and a simmering sense of injustice. Imagine the conversation. Two brothers, once inseparable in public appearances and private memories, now standing on opposite sides of a chasm created by duty, authority, and family history. One represents the monarchy, the institution itself, upholding centuries of tradition. The other, stripped of official recognition, embodies independence, resistance, and a life increasingly defined outside the palace walls. Each word, each gesture, is amplified by the history of their relationship, the weight of public scrutiny, and the knowledge that any misstep could ignite a media storm. But the rift isn't just about the decree. Analysts suggest that long-standing differences in worldview, priorities, and public engagement contributed to the tension. William, groomed from birth to lead and maintain the monarchy's image, adheres to a strict sense of duty and decorum. Harry, in contrast, has increasingly challenged expectations, pursuing independence, media projects, and philanthropic efforts that sometimes contradict traditional royal norms. The decree was, in many ways, the crystallization of these differences, a formal acknowledgement that their paths, while once intertwined, were diverging in dramatic and irreversible ways. Publicly, William maintained composure. His official statements were careful, measured, and devoid of overt emotion, reflecting the gravitas expected of a future king. Yet insiders report that privately, his reactions were more complex. There were moments of anger, frustration, and doubt about whether the decree was handled in the best possible way, both for Harry and the family. Other moments were reportedly tinged with regret. An awareness that while the titles could be stripped, the emotional and familial cost was immeasurable. The tension between them also reflects the inherent contradictions of royal life. Duty and loyalty demand that William support the monarchy and, by extension, the king's decision. Family and empathy demand compassion, understanding, and reconciliation. Balancing these forces is nearly impossible, especially under the glare of global media attention. Every private word, every subtle gesture, risks being interpreted, sensationalized, or misrepresented. The stakes are both deeply personal and profoundly public. The situation became more complicated when intermediaries attempted to mediate between the brothers. Advisors, senior aides, and family friends were reportedly called upon to facilitate dialogue, ensuring that discussions did not escalate into outright conflict. Yet these attempts often only highlighted the differences between them. Each brother's perspective, rooted in personal experience, upbringing, and public expectation, clashed in ways that defied easy resolution. Even the timing of the decree played a role in the fallout. Sources suggest that William felt the announcement was abrupt, lacking the personal consultation he expected as Harry's brother. This perceived breach of trust fueled frustration and further complicated their interactions. It wasn't just a legal or ceremonial issue, it was a personal one. The speed and finality of the action, combined with the public exposure, intensified emotions and set the stage for a prolonged period of tension between the two princes. Consider the psychological impact on Harry. Losing his titles is painful enough, but feeling misunderstood or unsupported by a brother adds a layer of isolation and betrayal. These emotions, already raw, were amplified by the global spotlight. Every reaction, every statement, and even silence became subject to interpretation. For William, the challenge was equally profound, balancing personal loyalty against the perceived necessity of supporting the king's decision and preserving the monarchy's stability. And yet, despite the tension, moments of empathy reportedly emerged. Some insiders hint at private gestures, subtle attempts at connection, and conversations that, while brief, acknowledge the enduring bond between the brothers. These moments, however fleeting, underscore a critical truth. No matter the decree, no matter the titles lost, the personal history shared by Harry and William remains. Childhood memories, shared experiences, and the undeniable tie of blood cannot be erased by any document. The public, of course, has been fascinated by every perceived sign of the brothers' dynamic. Social media exploded with speculation, headlines chronicled their gestures, and analysts parsed every interaction for signs of support, conflict, or reconciliation. Some saw William's calm public demeanor as tacit support for the king's decree. Others interpreted it as detached frustration. Harry's measured responses were dissected for hints of defiance or heartbreak. The world watched, and every move mattered. Even ceremonial appearances following the decree were fraught with tension. Advisors reportedly debated seating arrangements, speaking orders, and protocol, aware that the slightest misstep could signal division to a public already eager for drama. Every handshake, glance, and nod was interpreted, analyzed, and reinterpreted by commentators eager to understand what the decree meant for the brothers' relationship. And then there's the question of the long-term impact. Will this moment define the brothers' relationship for years to come? Will it create an unbridgeable rift, or will it serve as a catalyst for understanding and reconciliation? The truth is, no one can say for certain. The palace operates on centuries of tradition, yet personal relationships, especially between siblings, can defy even the most rigid structures. What's clear is that the decree was more than a legal act. It was a statement, a turning point, and a catalyst. It forced the brothers to confront difficult questions about loyalty, identity, and family. It placed them in a situation where every decision, every conversation, and every reaction carried outsized significance. And it set the stage for a series of events that would ripple across the palace, the public, and the global perception of the royal family. Yet the drama doesn't end here. One insider has revealed that immediately after the announcement, a private meeting occurred between William and senior advisors that was not disclosed to the public. In that meeting, strategies were discussed not only for managing Harry's response, but also for anticipating public reaction and potential media fallout. Some reports suggest that William faced a choice: step in to mediate, stay silent, and let the king's decree stand, or attempt a more nuanced approach behind the scenes. The stakes were enormous, and every decision carried personal and institutional consequences. And one more revelation adds to the intrigue. Sources hint that Harry, despite the decree, had already been preparing his own plan of response, privately considering how to navigate life outside the formal titles, while also maintaining his influence, public image, and personal dignity. This preemptive strategy may have contributed to tension with William, who reportedly felt that such preparations undermined the authority of the monarchy and his role in the family. So as we consider the fallout between Harry and William, one question looms: how much of this is personal, and how much is a reflection of the broader pressures of royal life? How do two brothers, bound by history and blood, navigate decisions that are both intensely private and impossibly public? And most importantly, what will come next as they attempt to reconcile duty, loyalty, and their own humanity? The answer, insiders say, may lie in a private conversation yet to be revealed. A conversation that could reshape the brothers' relationship, redefine public perception, and perhaps even alter the trajectory of the monarchy itself. And as the world watches, one truth becomes increasingly clear: the fallout between William and Harry is far from over, and what comes next could change everything about their lives and the royal family forever. Imagine dedicating years of your life to service, putting your body, mind, and soul on the line, only to have the recognition you earned officially taken away in an instant. That's exactly what happened to Prince Harry when the palace decree arrived. His military honors, a cornerstone of his identity and public service, were stripped overnight. The medals, the ceremonies, the ranks, all formally revoked, leaving a void that was as symbolic as it was deeply personal. But why did this matter so profoundly, and what did it reveal about the monarchy, family dynamics, and Harry himself? To understand the magnitude, we have to look back at Harry's military career. Trained rigorously, deployed in Afghanistan, and lauded for bravery and leadership, Harry wasn't just a figurehead in uniform. He was a soldier, a helicopter pilot, and someone who earned genuine respect among his peers and subordinates. The honors he received, the medals, appointments, and ceremonial distinctions, were not simply decorative. They were symbols of courage, discipline, and dedication. To strip them away is to question, in a public and formal way, the service itself. The morning the decree was delivered, aides describe a tense atmosphere at Harry's residence. Messages were read, legal language explained, and the words sank in slowly. One palace source later described Harry's reaction as a mix of shock and quiet defiance. Unlike the immediate public spectacle of losing a title, military honors are tied intimately to one's sense of identity. Losing them doesn't just affect public recognition. It strikes at the core.